Hey, good morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube Daily Double. We're doing Shabbos, Parak Yud Aleph, Mishnah is Dalet. Hey, Mishnah Dalet says, Zorek b'yam arba amos. People like to skip rocks, right? You skip rocks. But here you're in the water already, because if you're not in the water, then it's like the next Mishnah, we'll see. You're in the water, and you're waiting in the water, and you like to skip rocks. So you Zorek b'yam arba amos, you're potter, because Mayim is a Carmelist. It's not considered Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah, right? The only time you chayiv for Havaras Dalanam was in Rosh Hashanah. A Carmelist, a Yam is a Carmelist, which is an indistinguishable type of Rishus, and therefore, Midrabban or Machmer, the Raisa is not a problem. You're not chayiv achatas. So you have a puddle of water, right? And people step over this puddle of water. If you throw into it, or across this pond through 4 amos, you are chayav because it's like a Rosh Hashanah. It's only considered a puddle if it's not deep 10 tefachim. If it's less than 3 feet deep, so then it's part of the Rosh Hashanah because people pass through by. Rokak mayim, Mishnah continues, Rokak mayim Rosh Hashanah malechas ba'azarg b'tocha arba amos chayav. This basically is a repetition of the first statement in the Mishnah. Again, if it's a Rokak mayim, a puddle of water, right? The reason it repeats it is for two chidushim. The Gemara says the second half of the teacher, even if this pond of water, this puddle of water, the width is 4 tefachim, as long as the depth is less than 10 tefachim, it's still considered a puddle. And secondly, even if people only pass by Yalidei Chak, meaning sometimes people a puddle of water, people just walk right through. But if it's a deep puddle of water, 9 tefachim, people are not going to want to walk through, only where there's nowhere else to go, Yalidei Chak. Nonetheless, that makes it part of the Sharabim, and therefore you're chayiv for throwing Dalet Amos, because it's Havaras Dalet Amos Sharabim. Hey, Azorach ben Ayam liyabasha. Here we're talking about where you're in the sea and you throw it to the land. Or you're standing on the bank of a river and you want to throw into the river. Or you throw from the boat you're on a raft and you throw into the boat. The boat is Shizayachid, right? The Yam, again, is the Carmel. All these cases, you throw one boat to another boat, and the Carmel is interposing between them. Again, you're Potter, because we're dealing with a Carmel, it's not a Shirab. So you have two boats that are tied to each other. You can, as long as you make an Eruv, right? It's two Rosh Hashanahs next to each other, owned by different people. So you have to make an Eruv. If you make an Eruv, you can carry from one to the next on Shabbos. If Enam Kshura, so they're not tied together, even they're near each other, because since they're not tied to each other, there's a small space between the boats, and therefore, if you want to take from one to the other, the Carmelist is going to be in the middle, and you can't make an Eruv from two Rosh Hashanahs to join them together if there's a Carmelist interposing between them. That's the conclusion of today's share. Stay tuned for a fascinating Ian Mitzion. We talk about the difference between Havaras Dalet Amos Sharabim and being Moti Mirshus Hayachad Sharabim. We'll talk about it in the context of Carmelists and explain based on that the fundamental difference between Havaras Dalet Amos, which is a Tolda, and Hachnasa and Hotzah Mirshus Hayachad Sharabim or Sharabim Yachid. Really, it's actually Hotzah is the Malacha. Hachnasa is a Tolda. Hotzah is the Malacha taking Mirshus Hayachad Sharabim. That's the real Malacha. How is that fundamentally different than Havaras Dalet Amos Sharabim? There's a famous of Chaim Brisker about that. We'll talk about that. Ian Mitzion coming up next.